Hey YouTube, today I'm going to be talking about what I personally believe is God's purpose for marriage, and something that's very key that sometimes we seem to leave out of relationships and or marriage for those of us that are married. And this can be applied both ways. Even if you're not married, you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, this is still something you should involve in your relationship with that person, because ultimately it's going to help you grow closer together and closer to God. I want to first off look back at, why man was created, what purpose God gave man. So if you look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, it says, God blessed them and said to them, Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living creature that moves on the ground. So he gave the very first man this very important job. He said, watch over my creation, govern it, is what other translations say. I know the New Living Translation says that. It says, govern over what I have created. And he gives him this job, and he gave man the job of naming the creatures. He does the same with us today, but today our task is just a wee bit different. Today our task is not only to glorify God, but also to spread the love of Christ so that everybody will know of His great and awesome love. And he gives not only men, but women a task for their life that they will fulfill within their walk with God. Now, most people would say, wouldn't marriage, wouldn't a relationship distract you from what God's purpose for your life would be, what His task for your life would be? And even Paul talked about it in 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 7 through 9. He says in the NIV, I wish that all men were as I am, but each man has his own gift from God. One has the gift, the other has that. But he's talking about, I wish all men didn't have to marry. I wish we didn't marry, because ultimately, he says, I feel it distracts us from our purpose from God. He says, but notice what he says? He says, that's personally how I feel. That's not from God. That's just how I feel about it. He says, but marry if you cannot control yourselves. Marry if you cannot stay sexually pure. Because it's better to be married than to burn with lust. But I feel personally that God had more in the making of godly relationships and marriages when He made that a part of this life. I think He had more in mind than just keeping us from being sexually impure. I definitely believe marriage and relationships are more than just sex. In fact, if you look back at Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 through 24, it says, the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a suitable helper for him. Now the Lord God formed out of the ground all the beasts of the field and the birds of the air. He brought them to man to see what he thought of them. And whatever man called each of the living creature, that was its name. So the man gave the names to all the livestock, the birds of the air, and the beasts of the field. But for Adam no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, He took one of the man's ribs and closed up the place with flesh. When the Lord God made a woman from the rib that He had taken out of the man, He brought her to man. And man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. For this reason a man will leave his father and his mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. The man and his wife were both naked, but they felt no shame. You see, this part of the story of Adam and Eve is used in so many premarital counseling and other relationship sermons and Bible studies, but it holds something key. Because if you look, it says they became one. And I feel that's key in a relationship, because this is how I look at it. I feel that marriage and relationships are supposed to be a support for each other, supporting each other in what goals God has given you in life. I look at it like this. If they became one, let's assume I'm one person, right? I'm one person, I have all my arms, I have all my legs. I am by myself, me alone, I am one. Okay? Let's say I want to walk over to the camera and turn it off. Now, I can walk over there, but if my arm decides not to help support my leg and the goal to turn off the camera, that camera's not going to get turned off. Because my leg can walk me over there, but if my arm decides it's not going to help, that camera's going to stay on. Whereas, let's do it the other way. Let's say the arm wants to turn the camera off, but the leg doesn't want to support the arm. The arm can't reach all the way over to that camera. I cannot reach all the way over to that camera without moving my legs. And so as one, if we work together, we achieve our goals faster because we're supporting each other in our roles with the brain being God, with His tasking being what we do together so that we achieve it. And I believe that marriage and relationships are meant to be support for one another. See, whether it's your spouse or your mate, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, God gave each of you a purpose. And when He put you together, He put you together so that you could support each other in that purpose. And ultimately, whatever He's tasked you to do in life, it does the same thing, no matter how different it is. Because ultimately, no matter what we do, as long as we're doing it for God, because God told us to, because we want to glorify God, ultimately we're glorifying God. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you're an evangelist, whether you're a preacher, whether you're an AC worker, whether you have a secular or a ministry job, it doesn't matter. If you're glorifying God, and it ultimately is achieving the same purpose. This is how I feel about marriage. I feel personally that marriage and relationships are supposed to hold two very important things that we seem to be leaving out of the modern day relationship. Not only is it supposed to support each other in the goal and the purpose God has given you in your life, but it's also supposed to support and encourage growth closer towards God. So that as you are united as one, you help grow each other closer to God. So that as you get closer to God, you get closer to each other. And as you get closer to each other, you get closer to God. So the last thing I'm going to close with this is, if your marriage or your relationship is not supporting what God's asked you to do, it's not supporting growth in God, then what is your marriage or relationship doing for you? And is it something godly and pleasing to Him? So that's all I got for today, YouTube. I can't wait to see you next week. Really think about this as you walk through your day. Think about your relationships, or if you're married, think about your marriage. If you're married, God can still redeem that. God can do so many beautiful things with that. But you got to be willing to take the first step and seek God for that. All right, YouTube, I'll see you next week.